Well, it's hard to believe we are just about 1 week away from Thanksgiving, and there's nothing like fighting with loved ones over politics and long-nursed grudges, to kind of reinforce the challenge that lays ahead. But my next guest encourages a different path. Here to talk about approaching difference with curiosity is John Filson, a content creator and social media bridge builder here in Jacksonville. John, nice to see you.
Thank you. Thank you, Ann.
So tell us a little bit about, first of all, what your social media profile is for people who aren't interested. We're going to show some clips for people watching on our live stream, but what does it look like? What are you doing?
I'm basically documenting my own journey, my learning journey, being curious and empathetic about others who are different from me. So, for example, I have a little bit of background in Iraq as a relief worker years ago during the war. And so I've posted a lot of things about Iraqi culture versus American culture. Since moving to Jacksonville a few years ago, I've been discovering for my own self, being new to the South, being new to all sorts of history here, the experiences of Black Americans in local history here.
Mhm.
And so it looks like me exploring, talking to people, trying to do it with humor and a little bit of fun because crossing social and political differences should be fun. Um, and otherwise, it's a wide variety of things.
So I want to play a particular clip that just sort of shows how you maybe try to build a little consensus around ideas of similarity. It has to do with a certain favorite sandwich in the United States. Let's just play a little, and then I'm going to ask you about it.
A delicious snack in Iraq called rashi or dibis. Rashi is kind of like peanut butter, but you make it with sesame seeds. And dibis is molasses made out of dates. You eat it with fresh bread, and it's like the Iraqi version of PB&J. It's also a great snack during times of fasting. In fact, I knew a lot of Chaldean and Assyrian Christians who would fast during the morning during Lent and have rashi or dibis in the afternoon. I loved it. So much, in fact, that I actually had two goldfish when I lived in Iraq, and I named them rashi or dibis. Sadly, they also decided to fast from being alive. All your humble.
So the goldfish didn't make it, but you kind of fit a lot in there. I mean, you're making it very relatable. You're talking about peanut butter and jelly, but you're also talking about, religious rituals. You're talking about very different cultures. And in a subtle way, you're sort of making it all seem kind of lighthearted, but it's deeper than that.
Well, I appreciate the question. You're sort of getting into my everyday mind and how I'm thinking in this space. How do you take something that's so foreign and different that people don't have any exposure to, and make it relatable? And there's lots of ways that I've done that in different ways. In this case, there's nothing more relatable than peanut butter and jelly. But to understand, to me in my mind, having known Iraqis and cared about Iraqis and worked with them shoulder to shoulder for a long time, um, I know so much about them and their heart and their worldview that Americans don't have the privilege to know necessarily. So I'm constantly asking myself, what can I do to take this totally different world and make it accessible and understandable to people in another world? And that's the essence of what I'm trying to do.
And so, if you go through your social media, you have done a lot of adventures. You've gone to all kinds of different cultural events. You've talked to dozens, if not hundreds, of people and interviewed them. How have you been received?
It's overwhelmingly positive and constructive, and I don't think that's by accident. I I think I'm conscious about the approach that I take. I do have a position. I'm not apolitical. I have a bias toward people being nice to each other and trying to understand each other better. That's my
It's a
that's my
fair bias.
that's my politics in a nutshell. But I do take positions on things, and but I do it in a way that acknowledges the validity of other points of view, and I don't suggest it as though this is how you should think or this is the only way to see it. And I think that's a little different than a lot of what's on social media today. I think it's refreshing to people. They've told me that, and so I think that's a little bit about why it's been well received.
And so, how do you come up with your next adventure? And how do you choose? I mean, you go to cultural events, you go to churches. You recently went on this bus trip that is a kind of an exploration of Black history and sites of significance in the African American community. How do you pick? How do you choose?
It's through relationships and frankly, what I have time for.
Yeah.
It's time is always against me, but in this case, the bus tour is an amazing tour of historical neighborhoods in Jacksonville to support Black-owned businesses. And the first time I went, I was the only white person on the bus, and that was an experience worth commenting on, and I did. But I did it in a way that showed that I don't know everything. I'm here to learn. I'm not colorblind. we're not colorless beings. I understand the context where all this is coming across, and I'm just trying to model curiosity and empathy about others, doing something that a person like me doesn't often do. And so that's sort of kind of the approach that I take, putting myself in somebody else's world and taking people along with me as a result.
Other than producing social media, what is your experience with social media? I mean, as you said, a lot that exists out there is not of this tenor. It is very different and sometimes in really troubling ways. So, what is your own appetite for social media? What is your own consumption? And and what is your, if anybody, what are you emulating?
Well, I see the same things that I think everybody does, and my anxiety goes up. I can feel my stomach turning in knots when we're talking about issues. And for me, it's the what has driven me for a long time. It's worth stating for context is I I by default I just whenever I see people interacting in daily situations, maybe there's somebody standing next to somebody else in the supermarket. Maybe one person is very particularly conservative person. Another person maybe not. But I can see that what connects us is so much more universal and common than the things that divide us. And I think the divisions that we imagine between ourselves that are reinforced on social media is largely artificial. And so I'm seeing um, kind of the divisive content on social media the same as everybody else. But so therefore, I think it's a good idea to take to try to take a different approach in it when I'm posting. But I'll also mention to your question, when I get comments, occasionally get nasty comments. I've been surprised that nothing. I'm not inviting trolls, but I haven't got a lot of those. But when I do, the way I respond is as if you're responding to somebody in real life. Because imagine that person that's commenting, sure, they have a username, they have a funny picture, but that's a person, just like you might meet in real life. And the way you respond to them, even if they've given you a bunch of ugliness hiding behind that anonymity on social media, there's an opportunity to turn that around. And I have to take a beat. It hits me in the gut when somebody says something negative or a personal attack or something like that. But I get in the habit of, I picture, water off a duck's back. I literally picture like just shake it off and don't even think about it. Maybe that's unhealthy compartmentalizing. I don't know, but that's how I do it. And then I respond kind of automatically. I try to validate something that's logical in their thinking. I try to acknowledge the little bit of their perspective. I don't attack back. And you would be surprised how many trolls I've turned into followers.
Hmm. When you say you see two people that might come from very different perspectives, and you see that they have more alike, what do you see that they share that you think people should be thinking about instead of difference?
It's funny from the conflict resolution world, they talk about positions and interests and needs, and positions are at the top, like the top of the iceberg that you see above the surface. We already know we disagree on the positions. That's obvious. But underneath the surface are our interests, and maybe they align, maybe they don't. But underneath that, deeper still, is our fundamental needs that's driving our interests that then determine our positions.
Hmm.
And those almost always overlap. They're, I mean, we want what's best for our kids. We want some sort of financial stability. We want the basic things that everybody does. And so that's what I have in my mind when I'm thinking about starting points for things.
Mm.
Then when the division comes for all sorts of reasons based on how we consume information, how we share information, how we form opinions. And I think that's where it becomes a little artificial.
So, we alluded to the fact that, next week is Thanksgiving. Is there anything that you've learned through your process that would be helpful or applicable to people heading into some dicey conversations?
Yes, I've talked about how to engage with people in a way that can make them less defensive. And it's a psychological thing. It's comes from research. I'm thinking of the work of Harville Hendricks in mirroring, validating, and empathizing, and it's basically paraphrasing what somebody has said in their own words. Not to make this clinical or weird or awkward. It should be in the course of a natural conversation, but say the words that they have said so that they know they've been heard. there's a psychological effect that happens. The reason people get their shoulders come forward and they sit up in their chair and they'll have a little aggressive, look on their face is because they feel their position, their view is not being heard.
Mm.
If they feel like you have heard what they've said, you can immediately see their shoulders relax. And the pushback I get on this is that, well, if somebody's objectively wrong and I'm validating their objectively wrong view, that's not right. I can't do that. And my response to that, and what I would tell people is, if you want to win the argument, you have to win the person. Don't think about, put the issue itself aside for a moment. It's not going anywhere. This is a psychological human tactic to make a human brain less defensive. And then you have a better chance of sorting out that issue. So it's all about how you can manipulate is too strong of a word, but use psychological techniques in order to make people less defensive and more open to hearing a different point of view.
Well, it's good advice, and it is really encouraging to see that the work that you're doing on social media has been so well received because it's fascinating topics that you're covering. It's important history, but it's also, I think, really good exercises for people to see you go through. So thanks for what you're doing. Tell people what your handle is. People can search for your name, John Filson, and find most of your platforms.
And it's Filson with an F like Frank. I say on the phone all the time, F like Frank, ILSON. Anyway, on Instagram, it's John, JOHN _ Filson. On TikTok, it's just at John Filson. You can also find more information at johnfilson.com about what I'm all about.
All right, John Filson, it's so nice to meet you. Thanks for being here.
I appreciate it. Thank you.